Welcome to episode 113. Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? No matter your destination, the travel specialists at 3D Travel Company are there to help. Just head on over to my website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click the Book Now button on the left-hand side to get your free quote today.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today I am super excited to be bringing you an interview with the man behind the voice of Walt Disney's Goofy for the last 31 years and counting. Stay tuned for some amazing clips and a special interview with today's special guest.
I got gas! Lots of it! Me and my brain cooked up a new fuel to make our roadsters go faster. Goofy gas! I can't wait to try it out in today's race. So, who wants to Goofy gas up first? Gee, Max, is that big foot of your stomach?
Man, I'm starving.
Alphabet soup coming up. We made it! Come on, Max, let's get you on stage.
Maybe this isn't such a good idea. Then again.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today it is my distinguished honor to be bringing you an interview with Bill Farmer. Bill, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it is an absolute delight, and this is a childhood dream come true, so thank you so much for giving me some of your valuable time.
No problem. No problem.
Well, Bill, the very first thing we love to do when we have a guest on the show, especially for the very first time, is to get to know them. So tell me, who was the young boy Bill growing up, and how did he grow into the man that he is and the actor that he is today?
Oh, my goodness. Let me see. Well, as a young boy, I was kind of one of those weird kids, and, my mom was like, our Billy's weird, and I'd put on plays in the basement, and, I grew up in a little town in south central Kansas, Pratt, Kansas, about 7,000, and I think, our biggest export were tumbleweeds, so it was just a little western type of town.
Yeah.
And, one theater, 3 channels on TV, and I was bored silly, so, me and my friends started, doing plays and things like that and messing around with a tape recorder, and I guess that's where it all started back in those days. Yeah, but I was always kind of a science nerd as well as kind of artistic in the sense that I love movies, I love television, I love cartoons, and so it kind of melded into a career after many years.
Oh, that's fantastic, Bill. Well, thank you so much for diving into some of your earlier years and kind of the young boy that became the man he is today.
Oh, yeah. I was always the one, I think when I started, before I actually did voices, I kind of lip-synced. I remember doing that at my grade school once. I think we put on Alvin and the Chipmunks, and I lip-synced to that. So, I've always had a fascination with voices and comedians and impressionists, and that kind of set the stage for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Well, Bill, so how did you get into voice acting? Kind of how did that initially start for you when you were a younger man?
Well, in a way, it was an overnight success story, and in many ways, it wasn't. My degree was in broadcast journalism.
Okay.
And like a lot of people in those days, with a minor in electronics, I started off as a DJ at several radio stations in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, just spinning records and announcing, and they were little podunk stations, so we were always doing Mrs. Emmy Wilson lost a cat today. If you see that, call 1-800. And I would start doing characters, and just to fill time. Small-town radio is a great place to be bad because they didn't care that much.
Yeah.
They said, play a few records and do the commercials, and you can do whatever you want. So I'd come up, and I found I could do an impression of Wolfman Jack's So I started doing the Wolfman Jack show. And so they thought that Wolfman was at this stage, hey, Wolfman, how you doing? Hey, Bill, how you doing there? And so I would come up with all of these little characters and stuff.
Wow.
And it got me a nice little following on that. Never thinking that it would really amount to that.
Yeah.
After doing radio for a number of years, and a couple of years as an electronic technician where I got away from showbiz altogether, back in 1982, I started doing stand-up at a club in Dallas, which is where I was living at the time. And as luck would have it, the host of that comedy club in Dallas, learning what he was going to do later, was a guy named Bill Engvall, who was with, with Jeff Foxworthy and Larry the Cable Guy on the Blue Collar Comedy Tour.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was working out his material, learning his craft and everything. And I went up on a Tuesday night where you could do 5 minutes of comedy and stuff. And so I wrote a little routine, and it got a pretty good reception. And Bill said, hey, you ought to give this a shot. So I started coming back week after week. And within a few months, I was starting to do it at other clubs around Texas, Houston, and El Paso and other places. And it just kind of grew until an agent that I was able to get in Dallas said, why don't you go out to Hollywood with all the voices you do and give it a shot? So in summer of '86, I came out to Los Angeles, got an apartment, kicked around for doing some auditions, was able to get an agent. And then in December, they said, do you do any of the Disney characters? And Goofy was my favorite when I was a kid.
Wow.
And I said, I can kind of do a little Goofy there, and I'd practice the laugh. And so I felt that was pretty close. And, most people can kind of get close to a Mickey if they, if they can do a falsetto. They're kind of in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really do a Donald at all. I could just go, and that's all I could do. But they liked the audition, and out of about 1,000 people or so that tried out, they liked mine, and now it's been 31 years of doing that.
It's hard to believe how long it's been. You've literally been the Goofy of my entire lifetime. So it's quite awesome to be speaking with you today, Bill.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And a lot of people say that these days. So it's like, yes, I am getting old.
You kind of talked about it briefly about Goofy and your fascination with him as a young boy, kind of leading into my next question of, as a young boy, how much of an impact did Disney as a whole and the character of Goofy have on you as a young boy?
Oh, gosh, I remember sitting on my dad's lap and watching The Wonderful World of Color on Sunday nights with Walt. And I did have just a fascination with Goofy. I just thought he was the funniest character.
Yeah.
And I've always been a big admirer of stand-ups and, funny people. And, so he became my favorite. And, of course, I think everybody, saw, Bambi and Pinocchio and all of those earlier movies and stuff. And I saw them when they'd show them in the theater. They do reissues and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you just, anything like that was kind of fantasy or sci-fi. I was a big sci-fi fan, and I loved all the Sinbad movies with monsters and anything with like stop motion animation or traditional animation. I was just captivated by it, and I think a lot of people were.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of my favorite stop motion movies was Jason and the Argonauts back in the day when they had those clay skeletons.
Absolutely. And I got to meet and sit next to Ray Harryhausen one day when I was doing a signing at a Comic-Con.
That's amazing.
And which was a big thrill for me meeting him, because The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad was the movie, I think that was his first color movie that he had done stop motion with. And that was the one that when I first saw that as a kid, I thought, I want to be involved with that. I want to do that kind of stuff. And, of course, on television, a lot of the Hanna-Barbera, Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear and all of those, and, of course, Warner Brothers. And I've been very fortunate to have voiced a lot of those characters over the years.
Absolutely. Yes. Your career is definitely legendary as far as what you've been able to voice throughout your career, both Warner Brothers and Disney and Hanna-Barbera and all of those kind of things. But it's just amazing. It really is pretty. I have a huge smile on my face today, so I can't thank you enough for
my pleasure.
It just makes Goofy all that much more real to me. So next time I watch him, I'll be like, I know him.
Gosh, oh, shucks.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for sharing how much of an impact Disney and Goofy had on you as a young boy. It's fascinating to see that we share such a love for this character and for the company that's made such a wonderful coupling of characters, with Mickey and Minnie and Goofy and Donald. It's just, I don't think there's a kid alive that hasn't grown up loving one of or all of the characters as I love them all, but Goofy definitely cracks me up, from a Goofy movie to, Goof Troop and all of those, silly, little shorts where he's, trying to put together a car or whatever he's doing, and he just does it all wrong. But it's just the funniest thing ever, the way they construct those cartoons. No matter what Goofy's in or what format he's been put in, he's always a hoot.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess the enduring love that people have for these characters is that, they're kind of, we can all relate to them. We can relate to Donald being upset with everything and getting mad, or that, like, the world's against Goofy, inanimate objects confound him, and I think everybody's felt Goofy from time to time. So I'm very fortunate to have been able to, fill Goofy's big old shoes for a while. And unlike any other studio, Disney has felt like a family. It really is. People are personal friends, and it's not you just see them and you go home. You get to know them as you would brothers and sisters.
That's fantastic. I love that there's such a family environment there, even to this day, because they truly portray that. And from those that I've talked to that have been involved with Disney, it's just wonderful to hear that that's full circle for everything they do.
Yeah. It's I got really lucky.
Absolutely. I definitely think so. Well, Bill, what kind of joy does it bring to you knowing just how much happiness you bring to others through your acting around the world?
In the last few years, I've been doing more Comic-Cons, and that's really the main time you get to experience that. We're just in a booth with a microphone and a director, and we don't know the impact it has until I go out in the public or to Disneyland, or once in a rare time when something's on the screen, like a Goofy movie, and I can go enjoy people laughing at it while I'm watching it too.
Yeah.
And that's a great thrill. And it's just been amazing to realize how much of an impact these characters have. And it does seem to be kind of universal, and people tell me stories how, a Goofy movie I couldn't talk to my dad, but when we saw a Goofy movie, we started talking. There's a lot of stories like that I've heard. It's really gratifying that, it's, as I always say, I'm not famous, but Goofy is, and I get to hang around with him a lot, and that's kind of a nice place to be.
That's awesome. I absolutely love the way that you look at that with the perspective of who you are and who Goofy is, and just kind of that your pals hanging out. That's really cool.
Right. Yeah. He's a good pal.
Well, Bill, I can't thank you enough for all of the information and everything you've dove into so far. Again, like I said, I feel like a kid in, a candy store watching my favorite cartoon on the TV, the old boob tube. So it's amazing just to dive into some of the stuff we've talked about so far. But, for you personally, what have been some of your most memorable episodes or shorts or films while voicing Goofy for you personally?
Oh, well, as Goofy, there's been a lot of them through the years. Gosh, I've done about 3,500 different jobs as Goofy over the years. So, but some of course, a Goofy movie was one of my favorites because it, a lot of people have seen it. It was out in theaters. It became like a number one movie, number one VHS sales, I guess, in those days. But, like I say, I could see it affect people, and people bring that up more and more than probably more than anything. But I was very proud, and it was very cool to see your character on a big screen. I'd seen it first on the Prince and the Pauper short we did that was out with the Rescuers Down Under, and that was a big thrill too. Anytime it was on screen is a special treat. But really, the most memorable events were live events. We used to go down to Walt Disney World, and we would do radio interviews with, maybe as many as like 300 interviews in a week. Wow. They would have like stations from all over the world, and they would get us, and we'd go from one table to the next, and some guy from, Ireland, and then Chicago, and L.A., and Utah, and wherever. And we would come on as the characters and just kind of chat with them. And that's when we got playtime too, so we got to go to the parks together. Me and Wayne, who did Mickey, and Rusey, Minnie, and Tony, who did Donald, and Captain Hook, Corey Burton, and everybody. And we got to, play and laugh and be like a real family. So those are very treasured memories for me. Of course, recently we're doing like the Mickey Mouse shorts where is kind of drawn, kind of different, but we go back. It's a little more adult humor, a little bit written more for adults, and we've had a Halloween episode that was a half-hour episode where I played Dr. Frankenstein, and that was a special treat, and a Christmas episode, and gosh, there's just a lot of them through the years like that, but those are just a couple.
Absolutely. Well, speaking about holiday specials, I think some of my absolute favorites as a kid were some of the ones where they actually had the characters like live action, but there were like the musical sing-alongs, that mixed some cartoon,
right,
some live action from the 80s and 90s more so when those came out. Those were
absolutely
so fun to hear the characters doing. And then, of course, like the Mickey's Christmas Carol and all the other wonderful favorite, holiday specials they do around Halloween and Christmas. Those have always been nearest and dearest to my heart because the holidays, especially Christmas time, in the 80s and 90s, the commercials alone that played around these specials and then the shorts themselves from Disney were just, it was all magical, 100% all the way around,
Yeah, and we did over the years records. We did probably 20 to 30 albums, and some of them were like we did one called The 12 Days of Christmas, and we did an ensemble, and we had late Alan Young, who did Scrooge McDuck, and we were singing these songs. And I say when we got the rare chance of getting in the studio with everybody and, kind of riffing with each other and recording together, which is kind of a rare thing these days. Those were very special times.
Absolutely. And Alan Young was an absolute favorite of mine. He was a big character from Adventures in Odyssey for me, Jack Allen. And so
yes,
he was an actor that I loved, even in Mr. Ed the Talking Horse and, just countless other things. Of course, DuckTales, who couldn't forget that. But, he was one of those pinnacle characters when they did a lot of those musical sing-along things, along with Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, and Donald and Daisy. Scrooge was there a lot. And I loved that he was part of it, in a lot of those earlier years. So.
Yeah, he was a great guy and a great actor, and it's not the easiest thing to voice act. People think it's all just doing a voice, but it's really more about the acting. And he was a consummate actor and really brought that character to life.
Well, as far as your character goes from animation to movies, I'm not thinking of anything right this moment, and I know I probably should, but are there things you voiced for Goofy even within the parks themselves for Disneyland or Disney World or...
Oh, everything, yeah. We did something for Tokyo Disneyland a couple of weeks ago. We've done, in front of the castle at Walt Disney World, there's some live shows and parades, definitely. Any parade where Goofy's talking or any place that Goofy's talking, it's me, and we had to record it. And a lot of them I forget because there's so many of them that we do. And then I'll see a parade, and then I'll hear Goofy say, oh, yeah, I remember that. And sometimes it's been like I don't even remember doing that, but
yeah,
it's always fun to see Goofy. And sometimes I'll go up in the park, and of course the walk around characters don't talk, and I'll whisper to them, "Oh, I'm your voice," and they go nuts. They want to talk so much, but in 30 years, none of them have ever broken character and talked to me while they were out in public in the suit.
That's fantastic. Well, and I believe you're also, now that I think about it, you're on Mickey's PhilharMagic, which is a fantastic show.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Goofy's backstage kind of running the show. Yes.
That's one of my absolute favorites. It's definitely a must every time I go to Disney World. But it's wonderful to know that you're around us and near us through through the Disney parks, through the, shows we watch, the music we listen to with our, friends and children, and growing up with it, it's just been super magical to hear you all these years and to physically talk to you now it's mind-blowing, Bill.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, to all of the little boys and girls out there inside of us all, what is something you would say to them as Goofy?
Gosh, well, let's see, to all of you out there, don't ever give up. If you fall off a mountain, just pick yourself up and get going back up that mountain. Yep, and eventually you'll get to the top.
I guess that's what Goofy would say.
That's fantastic, Bill. I really appreciate it. So here's a question for you that kind of goes in line with, those who are looking at getting into an acting career. What kind of advice would you give to an aspiring actor or actress who might be looking to pursue a career as a voiceover actor specifically?
Well, I teach acting to aspiring voiceover students
Really?
via Skype
Awesome.
and here in my studio at home. And so a lot of people call me. They say, "Oh, I've always wanted to do this," and I'll say, "How much acting have you had?" And they'll say, "Well, no, I've even had people say, oh, I don't want to be an actor. I want to do voices in cartoons." Well, no, as Dawes Butler told me, I took classes from him when I was first out here, and he was, of course, the voice behind multitude of Hanna-Barbera characters like Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound, Quick Draw McGraw, and about 40 others, Captain Crunch, Elroy Jetson, a lot of things. And he was the first one to insist that, no, you're not doing funny voices. You are a character that happens to have a funny voice, but it's all the acting. So
Yeah.
I would recommend take acting lessons, because whether it's on a stage or behind a microphone doing a cartoon, it is a slightly different technique, but it is all acting.
And I've heard that more and more as, I've learned more about voice acting. When I started the show, I really thought I knew what voice acting was, and came to find out, that it's all about the acting. Like you said,
Yes.
not just, hey, I can do a funny voice, because a lot of times people can do a funny voice, but if you ask them to stand in front of 90,000 people and do that voice, could they do it? Probably not.
Yeah, and just it's good to be a mimic, and you can do a lot of fun things with that.
Yeah.
But then it's a whole different ballgame when you have to do a 4-hour session as that character, and you have to know how that character would say any line that they throw at you. And that's kind of a whole different thing and a whole different level that took me a long time, even with Goofy. For the first couple of years, I felt like I was doing an impression of Goofy.
Yeah.
And then I kind of learned the character and what makes him tick. And from that time on, I was able to speak as Goofy no matter what the dialogue was.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, as far as your teaching goes, Bill, how can people reach out to you to take classes from you via Skype or in person potentially?
Oh, yeah. I have a website, and you can go check it out and some of the demos that we've done recently. And my company is called Toonhouse, TOONHOUSE.com. And we put up a little website, and it has contact information on that. But you can kind of listen to some of the stuff. My son helps me out. He's a professional drummer and an audio engineer, and he's a lot better engineer than I was, so I'm really happy to have him helping me out.
Well, that's awesome that it's kind of a family thing. That's awesome.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, just briefly, can you tell us what was it like working with Dawes Butler? He was an absolute favorite of mine, especially Elroy Jetson. The Jetsons were one of my absolute favorites, and of course, Yogi Bear. What was it like learning from him?
He was the nicest guy, and in those days, I didn't have any money at all. So it was like $10 for a 3 or 4 hour session at his
Wow.
house in Beverly Hills.
Wow.
And I called him up once. Someone said, "You ought to take classes from Dawes Butler." I'm saying, like, the Dawes Butler, the real? Yeah, he gives classes. So I called him up. They gave me a phone number, and I called him up, and he kind of sounded like Captain Crunch. He said, "Oh, hi, Bill. Well, why don't you come on over on Wednesday, and we'll just kind of go over some stuff." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about the pay, or anything." And he was just the nicest guy, and just a giant talent. And he was, a lot of people, Corey Burton was in the class, taking classes, and so was Nancy Cartwright, and a bunch of the people that are out there today were
Wow.
taking classes from Dawes at the time. And so they've had very good careers, so I guess it was very, it stuck. And, of course, he was the one that really said, you're an actor. That's what you need to learn.
Wow. That's amazing. And, speaking of Nancy Cartwright, we had her on the show a while back, and she's an absolute delight. Absolute.
Oh, she is. Yeah. Yeah. And, my first series was one called Goof Troop, and she was one of the cast members, as was Frank Welker and Jim Cummings and Rob Paulson and April Winchell and Dana Hill, and it was like an amazing cast that I got to learn from, and I was the title character in my first series, and I got to hang around with these great talents, and it was intimidating, but very instructional as well.
Absolutely. I'm sure. I mean, I didn't realize Goof Troop was one of the first things that you had really worked on, but that was one of my absolute favorite shows with Goofy, and then kind of leading into the Goofy movie and everything, because those were just, I think it was one of the best animated shows ever during that era.
Yeah, and let me tell you, you go in with that, and we didn't even get a rehearsal. So they would hand us a script, and we'd go in. They may have written the last page that morning, and they'd just give it to you, and here, let's record it. And okay, and
Wow.
You're in the room with all these great actors, and you don't want to flub up and miss anything. So it was a little tense there for a while.
I could imagine. I definitely could imagine. Wow. Well, you definitely worked with some amazing talents throughout the course of your, 30 plus years, 31 years as Goofy. It's amazing to have been able to talk with you. But I have one final question for you today, Bill. And that question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Well, Wayne Allwine, who was the voice of Mickey Mouse until he passed away in 2009, put it best. He says, we just get to kind of carry the torch with these characters for a while, and we just hope we do it justice. And that's a very good way to put it. I just hope that people enjoy what I'm doing, because I certainly enjoy doing it, and I get a kick out of seeing people enjoy it, and it's just, I hope people like the old Goof, and I hope I'm doing him a good turn by voicing him.
Absolutely, Bill. Well, I would definitely say you've done an amazing job with Goofy in your 31 plus years of voicing him. And I can't thank you enough for your valuable time today and for chatting with me about one of my absolute favorite childhood characters of all times and lifelong characters. I've loved him forever, and I always will. So thank you.
Gosh, it was my pleasure.
Bill, as we close out today's episode, would you please do me the supreme honor of closing out today's show as Goofy?
Gosh, folks, thanks for listening, and I'm glad that I didn't mess up too bad. This is Bill Farmer, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice?
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Bill Farmer, the voice of Walt Disney's Goofy for the last 31 years and counting. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. A question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us next time for our special guest, Jack Angel, the voice of Liquidator from Darkwing Duck. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.